There's no such thing as a universal safety expert. Navy SEALs are highly trained for what they do, but few have the perspective to really understand what an untrained civilian needs to do in a self-defense situation. I know a lot about taking care of my family's safety needs, but lack insight into things like stalking and what it's like to feel afraid alone. Our friend Teja Van Wicklen was kind enough to come on today to share her experience and her perspective about women's self-defense and family safety through her program, Get Offensive. Welcome back to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and joining me today is Teja Van Wicklen. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm really glad that you're here today to talk to us. And I'll introduce folks to you a little bit. Teja is the owner and head trainer at Get Offensive. She's a 30-year veteran of martial artist with a background in edged weapons, firearms, and wilderness survival. She studied martial disciplines from many cultures over many years. She's been a personal trainer and a certified EMT. She's the ADHD mom of an ADHD son. She's been featured in magazines like Mademoiselle, Black Belt, interviewed on ESPN, Nancy Grace, Good Day New York, and Virgia Living. And I love this last thing on your bio about how you once leapt upon a melon in a grocery store for a Southwest Air Super Bowl commercial. Now, did you leap on it from behind in kind of a ninja assassin fashion, or was it more like a joyful jumping up and down because somebody won the game?
So it was a Southwest Air commercial, and we were in a grocery store, and there were a bunch of us. And one woman fumbles a melon, and some of you may have seen this. One woman fumbles a melon, and we all dive on it. And it goes, it must be football season. That's the commercial.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, Teja, you and I talked a lot about what would be the topic for your visit today, and I really loved your insight about how the pandemic, for folks who are watching this later, we're filming this in March of 2021, about a year into the coronavirus pandemic, and how we've already seen economically how some of the repercussions of this lockdown, of the pandemic, have exposed some of the vulnerabilities and weaknesses in our society. And you raised the very interesting point that it has also exposed some of the security and safety vulnerabilities in our lives. And I thought that was a fantastic thing to talk about. And you mentioned three very specific cases when we talked. And one was the fact that we've got kids home alone more. And one was the fact that we've got more women with more strangers coming to their houses because of the delivery. But the one I wanted to start with was another one that hadn't occurred to me, which was because of lockdown protocols, when people go to work, they're often in an empty or very sparsely populated building, parking garage, city street, and that means help is farther away. So could you hold forth a little bit on that?
Yeah. So this is not uncommon knowledge. I mean, basically I have a friend, and I think I told you about it. I have a friend specifically who came to me and we chatted about some things because she goes to work only once a week now because she has to, for some bizarre reason, physically sign papers for 5 hours. She has all these papers she has to sign. She's the only one who can do it, and she has to do it for 5 hours. It's 1,000 papers or 500 papers or something ridiculous. So she goes into work once a week, and she and the cleaning person who's there are the only two people there. And of course, she goes the same day every week to the same office, and anybody who's tracking her could see that very easily. Now, luckily, again, I'm going to always say this stuff doesn't happen very often, but what's too often if it happens to you? What's not often if it happens to you, right? So that's the kind of balance, right? The balance is that it's not like everybody's in danger all the time, but you have many fewer people on the trains, many fewer people in buildings. You have people doing things on social media. Everyone knows their home. If somebody knows where somebody is, the information is getting passed around so that everybody knows where you might be because you're not in very many different places. And if you're in a situation where you're getting deliveries a lot to the same place or the same people are delivering, there are lots of scenarios by which, because our schedules are much simpler, and there are fewer people around, that there's naturally more options for people who are looking to be pains in the ass, so to speak. People who don't have anything better to do, who are just looking to mess with you, can mess with you more easily. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious stuff. So then you and I, we went on to actually talk about how it would be important to bring that to the fore and remind people that maybe what they don't know is a problem, what they're not thinking about is a problem. But then we talked about why self-defense is even important and why it should be part of everybody's lexicon, part of everybody's, kind of general, thought process.
It's one of those interesting things. There's these weird taboos in our society of self-defense, sex, and finances, which we all need to know. But it seems like our society has decided that we're not allowed to ask our parents about it, and schools aren't supposed to teach it to us. And it's weird, right?
Well, and that's a good point, because if our parents knew more about it, they could teach us about it. And I'm really into the idea that if parents knew more about it, they could bring their kids up, not just saying, random things like don't talk to strangers, or, don't go out by yourself, or, that kind of stuff, have your keys ready, which are all, it's good stuff, but it's actually, and Gavin DeBecker will tell you, it's not don't talk to strangers, it's how do you talk to strangers and which strangers do you pick, which is a very different thing, and really important, right? Who do you pick? And Gavin DeBecker says, pick a woman, because they're statistically less likely to be dangerous, right? But there's a lot of stuff we can give to our kids if we understood it better. And my big problem was that to most people, self-defense is physical, really physical. As soon as you say self-defense, and I had this conversation with you, I started creating these online courses, and people were like, wow, what a great idea. I really want to do that. That sounds wonderful. How come this hasn't been a thing? And then they'd start taking my course and they'd go, I thought I was going to be kicking and punching. I thought I was going to be learning. And I had specifically said, hold on, are you getting anything, noises?
No, I'm not. Was someone trying to call in or something?
Yeah, let me know. I should have put it on Do Not Disturb. Don't worry about it.
No worries. No worries at all.
Oops.
We'll edit it out or make fun of you a little bit. It'll all be good.
Make fun of me. It's all good. So where was I?
We were talking about how people aren't, education and self-defense is so focused on the physical. When my brother was in the Army, and he and I were talking about what kind of hand-to-hand training he got, and he pointed out that his drill instructor's basic attitude was, man, if you have to use hand-to-hand, you have wasted a multi-$1,000 rifle that we gave you. You screwed up. And I feel like that's a theme that we should apply in self-defense training. If I'm very much like you, have had decades of martial arts training, and I've applied it by being kind of dumb now and again. That's less like you, but that's very much like me. But if I've got 2 kids, if I go hands-on with somebody, the number of bad decisions I have made prior to the moment of going hands-on is huge. And
so we could unpack that quite a bit. Out myself on a number of occasions, some of the dumb things I've done, so we can commiserate. Becoming a parent is like one of the most amazing and scariest things you'll ever do. It's a lot of people have said it's like your heart is wandering around outside your body. And I did all this crazy training where I did all these things and was like, wow, I could, I get really freaked out, but I can hold my stuff together and really act well. And then my son is kind of playing in the ocean, and I'm sitting there watching him, and then suddenly a wave picks him up and kind of pulls him into a riptide, and he starts getting pulled out. And I see the lifeguard is running in. The lifeguard's going after him. The lifeguard's got it covered. What do? I run right into the riptide and get sucked out too. Like, this is not what you're supposed to do after 30 years of martial arts training. You're supposed to know better. But that
Mhm.
kind of just planted this thing in my head, like, you are your worst enemy.
Mhm.
And no matter how much training you have, you're going to make mistakes. Don't let those mistakes be fatal. So there's lots of
Yeah.
mental stuff to know about. And a lot of the
Mhm.
mental stuff is stuff you need to know about how other people respond to the world and to you. But it's a
Mhm.
lot of it is how you respond to your own environment.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying about the courses. Everybody, I'd say to people, this is a mental self-defense course with a side of physical. I created these courses,
Mhm.
and people, and I said specifically, this is mental self-defense with a side of physical. The physical stuff is really important, and I have a lot to say about it. But the stuff that's not being covered is the mental stuff, and everybody needs a kind of a starter, a primer in this stuff, or from online stuff. I think it's really difficult. You have to have a basis in it.
Mhm.
So there's some physical stuff and some ideas, but mostly it's mental. After people would start the course, they'd say, oh, I thought I was going to be learning Taekwondo. I thought I was going to be kicking and punching. I thought, where's that right? And they, even though I said it, people don't hear it.
Mhm.
So people still hear self-defense, and they're thinking, get me in front of a bag, or,
Mhm. Show me how to stab
and I
somebody
think
with
there's
keys stuck between my fingers or whatever. Yeah.
whatever,
Mhm.
and that's the problem. The problem is that kind of stuff it's great, it's empowering, it feels great. I mean, when I started I used to get bullied by everybody. And one of the reasons I do this is because I was raised in iffy neighborhoods, and I was a bit of a bully magnet. And so when I started taking Taekwondo by accident, it changed. I started walking differently, and people stopped
Mhm.
bullying me instantly. It just became it was the way I walked and the way I held myself just changed. And that's a great thing. And I highly recommend any martial art. The thing is, don't mistake martial arts for self-defense. Don't
Mhm.
mistake Taekwondo for self-defense. They're not the same thing. And if you think you can beat somebody up, you may cause yourself a lot of trouble
Yeah.
when yell at somebody and say, hey, back off. I know karate and 7 other Chinese words, right?
Yeah.
As the t-shirt used
Well,
to go, right?
it's one of those. Yeah, it's one of those ironic aspects of training, right? That the self-defense benefits of most martial arts training are not actually kicking and punching. It's the way you move, the way you walk, the way you look less like a vulnerable target. And
Right.
the better we get at it, the less likely we are to have to use it, which is a bizarre truth of the whole
Right.
thing.
It is.
Mhm.
It is absolutely true. It's just the
Mhm.
studying of it makes you feel more confident, unless you're one of
Mhm.
a certain number of people. I wish I could say it was a few people. It's actually quite a high number of people who, once they start fighting, get really galvanized to go, hey, back off,
Mhm.
like, I can take care of myself. And that just, you can really raise the hackles of people who are overly prone to proving themselves, or taking,
Yeah.
or just asserting themselves with authority or whatever. You can, so.
Mhm. Yeah, I used to call that brown belt reflexes because that's about when people start kind of almost hoping to get mugged.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, look, we all
Oh.
want to prove ourselves, right?
Mhm.
It's just, and the
Yeah.
thing is, though, I think with women, um, there's a lot to be said for the fact that we're already, and this is a kind of, and I tend to philosophize a lot, so you might have to shut me down, but there's a lot to be said for the fact that we kind of already grow up in a situation where, and depending on where you are, I mean, if you're in middle America or you're in another country somewhere, you're already kind of raised in a situation where you're secondary. And it's hard, you're told, you're allowed to do certain things at the office, but not other things. Like if a guy gets really pissed off, then he's asserting himself. But if you get really pissed off, you're bitchy, right? That is still existent. So, you know, ways for women to express themselves strongly and not piss people off can be many fewer than maybe they should be. And so there are ways to strategize in different circumstances that can cause you less grief, if that makes any sense.
That does. I'd like, what are some of the best ways?
That's a pretty long conversation. Some of the best ways. So I think probably, I mean, you and I talked about this also, and it's, again, this is not sexy stuff. The problem with talking about this is it's really unsexy. Like, let's talk about breaking shit, right? That's much more fun. So what's one of the things is de-escalation. And de-escalation is a word that people hear a lot. They don't know exactly what's involved in it. And I think the most important part of de-escalation has to do with understanding your own emotional triggers and keeping them from tripping you up. And as someone with ADHD who has a lot of thoughts in my head and a lot of trouble kind of reining those thoughts in, emotions come up faster than you can handle them. And they come out, your words sometimes come out before you. And then afterwards you go, oh, geez, what was I thinking? Why did I say that? You say that kind of stuff, or you get freaked out or pissed off at the wrong time to the wrong guy. You say the wrong thing, you make a snappy comeback, and suddenly that guy's in your face, right? Or you've invited something. So I think de-escalation and sometimes reining it in, saying less. And sometimes that means letting someone else have the power. And that's really difficult for women, right? You're letting somebody else hold the power in the room and you're going, I see your point. Okay. And you back off and you don't get to be right. And that feels really quantumly unfair when you're a woman. It feels unfair to leave the power in the hands of the other, especially if it's a guy. And especially if you feel that they're really wrong, that they're wronging you, that they're putting you in your place, so to speak, right? And you have to just go, okay, he just told me I look nice and I should be quiet and continue to look nice because when I open my mouth, I don't look so nice anymore or something, right? And women hear that kind of stuff a lot. And you want to go, listen, dude, right? But maybe you're alone in an elevator. Maybe you're someplace where that's not a good idea and you have to suck that up. And that's a problem, right? I mean, that feels awful. And then what happens, here's another great one. As a woman, you go home and you tell people this, and your friends, especially your male friends, will tell you, you should have held your hand up and said, stop right there. You should have held your hand up and you should have told him, I am not fodder. You cannot treat me like that, right? You gotta really own yourself, right? And people will tell you to do this. And like I said, if you're in an elevator alone with this guy, maybe that's not the greatest plan. But then you go home and you second guess yourself. Women go home and they think, wow, I'm not as strong as I thought I was. Wow, I'm just like a doormat. And Rory, I had this conversation with Rory once, and he actually said one of my favorite lines. He said, yeah, you survived wrong. And I love that.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
For viewers who aren't familiar, she's talking about Rory Miller, who is one of the preeminent self-defense trainers and authors operating today, and his episodes in season 2. So go check that out because he's kind of the would you call him a mad scientist of the self-defense world? Is about right, or not an evil genius? Scientist. Yes.
A very subdued mad scientist.
Yeah, very chill guy. But yeah, that's very interesting to hear that perspective. And I don't want to in any way equate the male experience in the world with the female experience in the world, because it's a very different thing. But I feel like a lot of guys have that experience too, especially, because this is a show for dads, that somebody's mouthing off or cuts you off in traffic and you shut up and go on your way. And there's that little shoulder devil nagging you going, yeah, pussy. Yeah, right. You should have punched him in the mouth. It's like, but my kid's in the car, right?
Yeah.
But that same experience of being in a situation where the way that you don't get into more danger is you take one on the chin, and then you just kind of not here, not now. I don't need this. and you walk away. And giving yourself permission to congratulate yourselves for making the smart call in the moment, I think is something that's a little bit missing in our culture and missing in the training we receive unconsciously through our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I don't mean to, I don't mean at all to imply that this stuff doesn't happen to men. I have a son and a husband, and absolutely it does. I'm talking about it from the point of view of women, because especially in the office and that kind of thing happens, it becomes part of your oh, when do I assert myself? How do I assert myself? So then you're talking about boundary setting, and you're talking about, all that kind of stuff becomes a big, so there's just a lot that doesn't get talked about. And I'm kind of, I think there's probably a better place for me like a couple hundred years ago, philosophizing about this kind of stuff, right? I'm still trying to figure out where it fits in, which is, why the blog and the little courses and things, trying to eke out a place where this stuff makes sense to people.
No, that does. It does make sense, I think, to me, what you're saying. And one of the hopeful points right now is it feels like more people are ready to have the conversation. They're ready to listen to each other and not just assume that what they thought was going on is the only way that things are going on. But I also liked what you said about how de-escalation is, acknowledging your own emotional state, your own emotional triggers, taking responsibility and ownership of that, because that not only applies to self-defense, but it applies directly to parenting. Those little guys and girls we love, man, if you want to get triggered.
And driving.
Yes.
Parenting and driving, two places where our hackles go up and we suddenly get out of control and we can't get out of our own way,
Yeah, it's crazy. But that's that kind of de-escalation idea, that emphasizing de-escalation, which, as you note, a lot of self-defense instruction, a lot of what we think of as self-defense does not leave room for that. Yeah.
Well, it's actually in some cases the opposite. I mean, especially when women go into martial arts for the first time, everybody wants to, I have more trouble with well-meaning men, and most martial arts trainers are guys, and they want to help. They really, really want to help you. They want women to feel strong and empowered. So, but it ends up being a little bit misguided, because that you get the, get in there and be strong and be tough and all that. It's like the wrong, we don't get the other, we don't get the view of what, how what we're doing affects other people, right? When we say, go forth and conquer, be a big personality, stand your ground, make powerful boundaries and claim your space, right? When we tell that to the new person who's coming into, a class, we're forgetting to inform them that that's what you do in the moment of an attack, not as you go through life every day on an ongoing basis, right?
Yeah.
You don't march around going, hey, don't mess with me, right? You don't want that attitude, and you don't want to instill your life with that attitude. You actually, what you want is the physical feeling of safety to make you feel less, to make you feel safer. Just the knowledge that maybe you can take care of yourself to feel safer, so you don't have to. It's kind of like what I call the big dog mentality as opposed to a little dog, right? It's like, I always have a picture of the little dog going down the street, yap, 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 yap. And the big dog's there and the little dog's going, I'm not afraid of you, you don't scare me, I can take you, and the big dog's like, I'm not even talking to you. Like, what? The big dog's like, okay, great. So you want to be a big dog, right? You want to just be like, okay, no problem. You don't want to be, but I can take care of myself, and, get out of my parking space. I was here first, and I don't know who you think you're messing with. Right. But it's amazing how often I've seen people think that that's actually not, I'm exaggerating it, but that kind of standing your ground is the way to go, rather than maybe sometimes just, like you said, taking it on the chin. And maybe there's a way to do it with a little more dignity, but not pushing yourself into a situation that's detrimental.
Yeah. I think that's, again, one of the benefits of having fairly extensive self-defense training, where if you don't know you can take care of yourself and you get in that situation over a parking space or something else equally dumb, you walk away. And again, that shoulder devil's calling you names. You feel weak, you feel cowardly, I think. We've been taught to feel that way. But if you have sufficient training, you walk away from that just kind of feeling merciful. It's like, dude, you have no idea how lucky you are that I don't have time for this today.
Was it Peyton Quinn who came up with, I think you talked to Mark McYoung about Peyton Quinn also, and I forget what his 4, and Mark expanded it to 5, things you do if you've got a bully in your face, which is like give him a face-saving exit, right? So he might go, say something really nasty to you, and you, or something, make his point, and you could say, instead of, even if it's the dumbest thing you ever heard, you could say something like, you know what, I see your point. Because then he can back off without having to make his point and keep making it, right?
Yeah.
So, and I forgot, what are the other ones? Do you remember? It's a give him a face-saving exit. Don't call him, don't call him names, right?
Yeah.
don't tell him what you think he is or what you think he should do with something, or
what is it? Most social violence
with.
comes with explicit instructions as to how to avoid the violence, right?
Exactly. Right. Do this, don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And giving yourself permission to just avoid the violence. Nothing wrong with that.
Right. Well, and not second guessing it later, and doing what Rory says, which is being okay with surviving and making it, making it through without berating yourself for not being cool enough, not standing your ground the right way, or creating, stronger boundaries, or making a certain kind of impression. Just be okay with the fact that you did it and you're moving on, and move on. And actually, it's one of my favorite, this is another tangent, but have you seen Ted Lasso, the show Ted Lasso?
I have not.
Oh my God, run out and see it. It's fantastic.
Okay.
It's a very Buddhist show. It's a very Taoist show. And what's great about it is he says to his players, who are all, you've got a lot of testosterone in a soccer team, right? And he says, be a goldfish. It's the animal with the shortest memory. Move on.
Yeah. Oh, so you mentioned before that you do some self-defense classes, some courses, and that some of the people are surprised by the fact that it doesn't have a whole lot of hands-on. It's more conceptual, it's more attitudinal. What are some of the skills that you put in those courses, which I'm guessing are the ones that you think are the most important?
Well, we've talked about some of them. Basically, I have a flagship course called The Secrets of Women's Self-Defense, and it is, I tried to make it less dense, and maybe I'll give it another try and do a shorter version of it, but it's like an 8-week course, and it's very dense, and it's basically about everything about self-defense that nobody talks about or covers. It's everything that nobody covers, from what self-defense is and why I think self-defense should be part of the modern part of our education, kind of, like filing your taxes, and, learning how to file your taxes, or learning how to cook, right? We should learn the basics of human psychology, of our own psychology, learn how to hack into the way that we function, and understand how the way that we think and what we do gets us where we end up, so that we can kind of reverse engineer our lives in a way. And also find empowerment in things that actually empower us, rather than, it seems like empowerment, a lot of empowerment stuff has to do with how you look, or how physically strong you are. And I think there's something more to be had from that. So kind of changing the paradigm of the concept of empowerment, that kind of stuff.
Wow. So that's a lot, and that's some deep. Those are deep waters. Yeah. So if I were to sign up for the class, or to audit the class, assuming I've got 30 years of pretty basic, pretty typical self-defense training and a fair amount of experience, what would you say would be the thing that I found in that course that would surprise me the most?
Well, you have background in it, so I'm not sure. I think it might elaborate on a lot of things, you know. But what my courses are specifically geared towards people who, my blog, everything is specifically geared towards normal people, average people, and specifically women who have never had any martial arts or self-defense training and don't know what that means or what it's about or what to do with it. So what I would say is, what I did was the course came out of, let's give it a kind of a framework. So Mark McYoung came up with something called the 5 stages of violent crime, which I'm sure you know about. And Eric Kondo, who you also probably know, came up with the 5 Ds of self-defense. 5 and 5. And I went, ooh, that's kind of cool. 5 Ds of self-defense, which is from the target standpoint, and 5 stages of violent crime from the predator standpoint. And we put them together. And I called it the self-defense continuum. Okay. And what it does is show you what you should do and what they're going to be doing, what your predator and what you can do at each of these 5 stages. And it ends up being a before, during, and after. And what happens in martial arts classes is 90% of the time we're focused on the during. It's, oh my God, he did this, I have to do this, right? We exchange blows, we yell at each other, we run away, we whatever's going on, right? It's that very short 2 to 10 second moment of explosion that we're focused on. Meanwhile, there's all this stuff going on beforehand. Right before you get lost on the road, you had to take a bunch of wrong turns. So we talk a lot about what those before situations look like, what the person's thinking, how you can spot what they're doing, how you can spot their intent, how you can, extricate yourself if you feel like someone's getting into position, either verbally or physically. They're trying to create something, they're trying to create an opportunity. And what you can do about it, how you can extricate yourself from it, right? And so we go through these stages and talk about those and dissect them until we understand them, so that people can see violence as a process and not go, holy crap, not as just a holy crap moment, right? So that's what that course is about. And now I'm putting together stroller self-defense, and I'm gonna make some smaller courses and go a little bit simpler, and just hit on some key aspects of self-defense that have more to do even with parenting.
For example.
Well, for example, stroller self-defense is more video, and it just shows you what you can do with a stroller. We do some movements with strollers and talk about what you can do, because I feel like, I think I mentioned, I have 30 years of martial arts training, but I got to the end of that, I got pregnant, and all of a sudden I thought, I can't even do half this stuff pregnant, let alone with a baby in one arm attached to me with a stroller. Like, where does my training, what do I do with my training now? How am I, I'm going to grapple with somebody? What do I do? Put the baby down and go, okay, hold on just a moment. Let me unhook my baby from my carrier so that I can fight with you. So,
or even look at the knife and gun disarms. How many of those point the thing at where a grade school kid would be standing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Aim down, right? Get the gun offline, and oh, look at that. Yeah. My kids, right?
It's like, yeah.
Well, and that's great.
Yeah.
Also, like if you're doing home clearing, right? If you're clearing your home in the dark and you've ever practiced that, right? How do you keep from shooting your own family, right? They're very specific, areas to focus on and think about. So yeah, anyway, so I thought, it just dawned on me, and I thought, wow, like, nobody's doing this, nobody's talking about this stuff, and maybe there's a place for that, maybe there's a place for some of this knowledge to get out there.
Wow. And that course you're working on at this time?
Yeah, it's almost ready. Right now I'm navigating the electronic situation. I'm moving stuff to a different forum, and it's kind of stressful. It's just technology. I'm trying to navigate the technology. Hopefully shortly I will have moved everything over to another format.
I'll say, well, this will air rather probably in May. So hopefully we'll have a URL to put in the show notes where people can go take a
Well,
look
I
at
have a URL. It's just the URL basically says navigating stuff over, check in later.
it. Excellent.
But
Well, we'll make sure
there's a
that that
blog,
goes in
so-
then. Okay. We'll make sure that goes in then because that'll be great. Uh, so Teja, I really want to appreciate you coming in today. We want to thank you for it. But before we go, is there a topic that you haven't had enough opportunity to speak about that you'd like to tell us about for a few minutes? Just what do you wish people asked you about more?
Um, we could a lot of things actually, but we could talk about what self-defense actually is, what it means, and why it doesn't serve people, the way it should. Like, what do you think of when you think
Absolutely.
of self-defense?
So my immediate answer is, of course, the kicking and the punching and the karate and Jason Statham in a movie. But I have been trained out of that over several years. That to me, self-defense, honestly, and I've told this joke on the show a number of times, people, so viewers forgive me, but for me, I'm a middle-class, middle-aged man lives in the suburbs. Self-defense for me is going for a run once a day and eating fewer cheeseburgers because it's a heart attack that's going to get me.
Oh boy, you're going to get me on such a tangent because health is a sidebar for me. And I'm trying to figure out, I talk about it all the time. People are like, how is that self-defense? And it's like you said, and honestly, yes, you're a white male, but even if you live in a bad neighborhood, even if you have a different skin color, even if you're female or you're smaller or whatever, your health is still, and maybe even more so, a real issue. And you're probably more at risk from what you're doing to yourself than you are from what other people are going to do to you. And if you need to run from somebody, can you even run? Right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, violent homicide is not even in the top 10 causes of death in the developed world. Right. It's stroke, heart attack, chronic breathing issues, cancer, all
cool.
stuff
So
that our nutrition can fix.
We'll start all over again on the health.
Do you remember Tom Callis?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, he's kind of retired doing art in Idaho now, but he came onto my radar with just a little thing he put up on his website, which is a picture of a bowl of cherries that just said, "Eating well is self-defense."
I love that. That's great.
Yeah. And
here's the problem. Nobody knows what eating well is anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you know
Mark
Hyman, unless you know who Dr. Mark Hyman is, go delve into that a little bit. You may not know what good eating habits are. Well, I mean, I have a son who's ADHD and I'm ADHD, and I out myself all the time because we really are. We're like clinical. Not everyone says, "Oh, I'm ADHD." It's a real thing, and when you have it, it's a real problem. It's a real pain. And we discovered that we were allergic to certain foods, and that certain foods caused us caffeine, sugar, and unfortunately, wheat, which I thought was a joke until it happened to me. I was like, wheat, gluten, like everyone's just, it's what a load of crap, right? Okay, if you have celiacs, all right, but no, it's a thing. And so what happens is anxiety, brain fog, sleeplessness, all kinds of things. And I saw it in myself and kind of didn't pay attention to it until it became a real problem for my son. And we did some actual, like, really careful testing and tracking, and were blown away by what happened when we took some of this stuff out of his diet.
Wow.
He started getting straight A's. He started making friends. He started sleeping. He stopped having, anxiety attacks. I mean, stuff that had happened just disappeared gone, just from the food. So I'm a huge advocate of that stuff. I'm a huge advocate of taking care of yourself as self-defense. You can't exactly be your best person and live your best and most focused life and make the best decisions if your decision-making machinery is in disrepair, so to speak.
The engine needs the right fuel. So that was all very important, and I think we're both pretty passionate about it, but I don't think it was the point you were trying to make. So So defining, so you asked me to define self-defense, and I went ahead and I was a bit of a wise ass, and here we are.
Um,
But yeah,
I,
what do people think of when they think self-defense, and what is really self-defense?
well, so most people think it's physical, right? And they
Mhm.
think, and the problem is, we also think it's fighting face to face with people and that kind of thing. And it's much more complicated than that. And I think that self-defense in general leaves out psychology and sociology and health and proper fitness, right? I mean, psychology is a big one. Sociology, understanding social norms and what, again, you go back to Mark McYoung and Rory Miller and talk about what asocial violence is and how it works, and sorting out process predators versus resource predators, right? Someone who wants something from you specifically, meaning your wallet or your keys of your car or something, and somebody who
Yeah.
wants to use you as a toy for some purpose and you can't give something to get out of the situation, right?
Yeah, one of the most succinct explanations of that I ever heard was, do they want your stuff or do they want you?
You, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
kind of skirt
those are
around that.
two.
It can be an ugly conversation, but yeah.
Yeah. And that's a very important thing to understand that I don't think is touched on at all in most self-defense classes.
No, I don't think,
what they're
and I
about.
think one of the most important things that you come away from that discussion with is, one, that the same responses to in a social situation, like, you're making me nervous, I really would like to not have this conversation anymore, I'm gonna go. To a social person, they'll go, okay, whatever, screw you, right? But that's okay. But to an asocial person, to an asocial predator, and to a process predator, someone who's interested in that dynamic, that may be like, oh, he or she is weak. I can use that. That's cool. Oh, I'm getting into their space. I'm affecting them, right? And that can be galvanizing to that kind of person. So the same social reactions, responses that you have in one situation will actually have the opposite effect on a process predator.
And I think that most media depictions of self-defense come from the framework is almost always social. There's the wise ass line in the beginning, there's the great little zinger at the end, and then the parts of the show that help establish this person who's about to do violence, the good guy, as a good guy. Those are all very much in the social violence realm. So I think that's what most of us are going to assume is coming in.
Because it's what we know. And the asocial stuff is a lot scarier, because the asocial stuff is the stuff of hunting, right? When you, and it's a difficult conversation to have. If you're hunting something for food, you kill it and you eat it. You don't go, oh, okay, I've got it in my sights. Does it have a family? Nah, maybe I shouldn't do this, right? You're hungry, you shoot the animal, you skin it, and you eat it. And there are people who think that way. Now, luckily, they're few and very far between, but when you're teaching someone self-defense, you should actually specify that this amount of force is enough to stop somebody who's not really highly motivated in what they want to do to you or get from you, right? So you show you're going to fight, you put up a fight, and they go, you know what, you're too much trouble, I'm out of here. Screw this, I'll go find somebody who's easier. Another person will be motivated by a little bit of fight. And you have to know who that person is, because you may only have a couple of seconds to decide. You've got to give them your biggest, best fight that you've got, and you've got to do it right now. And to do that, there are a number of precursors. I think we talked about permission, right? You need to give yourself permission to do really awful things in order to make it through this particular moment. So it's ugly stuff. It's hard to talk about, but it's stuff that doesn't get talked about in self-defense courses, right? We kick, we punch, and we don't talk about what it feels like to actually make contact with somebody's face and bust their nose wide open or something, right? What that involves, what it's like to slip on blood, we never talk about that stuff. And so I feel like it's disingenuous, and like there's a lot more of a discussion to be had about martial arts and self-defense than just kicking and punching, which aren't the two best methods anyway for protecting yourself.
No, I absolutely agree. Those are very valuable insights. And I want to thank you again for coming on the show. This is fantastic information. And I'll make sure that people have your website and your courses, ways to contact you if you have any further questions, want to sign up for any of the classes. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching today. I hope you found something useful or maybe even inspiring. If you liked what you saw, please take a few minutes to subscribe, like, and comment. Those little things add up to big help for the channel. If you loved it, consider checking out our Facebook page for more family safety news and information. And think about supporting us on Patreon, where you'll get early access, monthly training resources, blooper footage, and other exclusive benefits. You'll find links to both in the show notes. Most of all, thank you for being part of the safest family on the block team. Stay safe, everybody. See you next time.